define clearly what's going on and how much longer they're truly living, we'll know the answer as to whether they're immortal or just much longer lived. I would take much longer lived with a good health span. Reverting cells to younger phenotype. In other words, you take old cells and they behave more like younger cells. And then extending the Hayflick limit. And one of the things that's funny about the Hayflick limit is Dr. Hayflick did not name the Hayflick limit. I believe Michael Rose is taking credit for it. I don't know who actually came up with the term. Mike says that he's the one. And it's really funny when you consider Dr. Hayflick's opinion on, I almost said beautiful words, on age management. Same genes, why the difference? This is the Walter Plunk studies. Genetic expression changes, the genes don't change, the expression does. When you add telomerase, you start reversing things. You start reversing gene chip, you start reversing gene chip-defined expression of which genes get turned on and turned off. The mouse on top, you can see it, is gray hair and looks old. And very interestingly, the mouse at the bottom is the same age and has longer telomeres. You have all these other things that are associated with gray hair thinning, weakened immune system, intestinal atrophy, spleen and splenic reduced size and function, presumably, and then decreased wound healing and decreased lifespan. Now, all of those things have been demonstrated, with the exception of lifespan, have been demonstrated. You're looking at essentially rapidly growing tissues, and that's indeed where you see the effects of retelomerizing fastest in those tissue compartments. So skin, again, a representation of some studies done by Walter Plunk, who worked with Bill. You're restoring the appearance histologically, at least represented in this slide, of young skin to older skin. Some specific papers, I'm not going to dwell on these, but Bill showed you these. Telomere syndromes. Bill has coined the term short telomere disease. This is, I feel the same way. We talked about cancer and death. These are some of the other illnesses that seem to be very closely related to telomere length. And again, as we redo some of these studies with HTQ fish, we're going to find, I think, a lot more things. There's some things out there that say, oh, no, numbers don't have a role. They were done with too small a number of people and too short a study to actually show up within the limits of the original testing that we had. TA65 is the world's only proven telomerase activation product if you define human studies as proof. This is the initial study done in 2005, basically showed, again, immune system improvements. Some of these other things I'm not going to dwell on because they were not statistically significant after the time. This is important because essentially it answers for about the 50 millionth time whether TA65 might cause cancer. I guess we'll have to do another 50 million to prove that it hasn't happened that way. And when I say 50 million, I'm not talking about all of cases. There's not that many studies that show that TA65 doesn't show cancer. Most, as Bill pointed out yesterday, most of the things that we see published now, people don't believe that telomerase is itself, by itself, oncogenic, unless it's expressed constitutively in an amplified fashion, which is exactly what happens in cancer. Right. There really aren't any major problems. The only thing I will show you is a clinical vignette is occasionally people develop anxiety symptoms. I've met one person who stopped taking because they got palpitations that were annoying. Again, we recommend you take it on empty stomach in the morning. There's a lot of people using it. Is it the fountain of youth? No, it's not. And there's a couple of reasons why it's not the fountain of youth. First of all, we don't know if telomerase activation is clearly the fountain of youth for us. We see some extremely exciting and intriguing things that happen when you turn on telomerase. We see immune system improvements, we see skin improvements, we see inflammatory marker improvements, we see glucose improvements. This is all human study data. Some of it's published, some of it's not. And we see the return of naive T cells, we see improved antigen presenting, we see decreased viral loads. And the very first people who actually took TA65 were probably HIV patients enrolled in the German study over 8 or 9 years ago. And you can see the dramatic drop in viral load and no side effects, no increases in cancer. Chrome. It's also a weak telomerase activator. somewhere between 2 and 7 times activation of telomerase, depending on which population you study. It seems to work specifically on shorter telomeres. It does not seem to impact the mean telomere length initially. It goes to where it's needed, so to speak, just the way telomerase activation does in its nascent form, without telomerase activator when telomerase is present. So it really seems to mimic the natural actions of telomerase. The other thing about it is it seems to work, at least so far in the studies, the older, more senescent cells that are present, the more telomerase activation you see. I'm leaving TA65 out of this because this was not studied with TA65. It was studied with telomerase activation, reactivation. The older the cells are at the start of the study, the more they seem to respond. And in point of fact, I would echo that the older patients that I have on TA65 seem to improve more dramatically than younger people. It should make sense. And these improvements are statistically significant. Now here's the part where, this is where Noel's talk stops, and mine starts. And here's the deal. There have been studies in humans. There have been studies in mice, there have been studies in cell cultures, and there have been studies with TA65 and also with telomerase activation, specifically, and now I'm speaking about Myrioblastus AAV9 virus, which is a trophic, non-integrated virus that causes approximately 10 times the expression of telomerase. And the cell lines that are affected in these relatively short studies, human study was a year, the mouse study with TA65 was only 3 months. And that's a fairly long time in mouse life years, I guess, but it's a relatively short time for study. And it's the same tissues, hematopoietic tissue specifically, white blood cells, the skin, the intestine, the rapidly dividing tissues, essentially those tissue compartments that are rapidly dividing are the ones where we see the most immediate improvements. And again, the importance of the immune system, which is the most studied aspect of TA65, the importance of the immune system in aging, I think is probably the most important compartment in terms of globally managing what happens in aging. And I'm going to get to the end of this really quickly so that I can give my special thanks and answer questions. So, questions? Sir?
Couple of questions. One is this TA65. What does it stand for? And what does it have to work on this?
Okay, I hear different versions. Okay, TA65 stands for telomerase activator 65. Now, one version I heard of this was the 65th compound that Cal Harley and the team at Genome tested. Bill probably will tell me that's definitely not it. The other version, and the one I believe most, is that when Noel Patton was thinking of a name, he wanted to call it a telomerase activator, so he abbreviated it TA, and he thought this would be really good for people over 65. Remember, it's the same guy who put metallic let's go with the slides.
And one more thing, the size of the telomere, can it be used as a predictor for the age of the person who lives?
I think that's a stretch. I don't think. I think we're trying to find something we call biologic aging, and people argue against the use of that term. I think it is useful in comparing where you stand in your percentage of short telomeres, specifically in the mean telomere length, to the rest of the population. But if you only do one test, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't really mean anything. Most of the telomere attrition that we see occurs between ages 40 and 65. The rapid, when I say that, there's a slope that's very rapid of decline in mean telomere length. So far, the data suggests that also the short telomeres, but short telomeres continue to increase after 65 and as time goes on. And again, maybe if Steve works with life down the road, we'll know whether what I'm saying is 100% accurate. Other questions?
Yes.
Sir?
If one develops a disease like rheumatoid arthritis, involved in infection of short telomeres, is the expectation that the rheumatoid arthritis will stay the same, get better, or what, if they lengthen their telomeres?
Well, TA65 has been commercially available, and that study has not been done. Okay, no one's done that study. So again, I can only pontificate. So